Welcome to Elijah's Discussion Forum. Now it says here, verse 5 of John chapter 10, a stranger they simply will not follow. You know, when I read the Quran, I just feel like it's almost a completely different message, and it just doesn't strike me as being from God. It strikes me as being from a man, or maybe one of the spirits, and from one of the spirits that's God's enemy. That's what it strikes me as being. So it says here, verse 5, again, a stranger they simply will not follow. So if you're in God's family, really in his family, then you're going to shy away from books like the Quran or the Jehovah's Witness translation of the Bible, which is, like, to me, the more I read it, the more bizarre it is. Just the English alone. The Jehovah's Witness translation strikes me as a translation that's done by people who don't really know Hebrew and Greek. Maybe they use the Strong's Concordance, and it seems to me, I'm thinking it was probably done by not enough people with not enough time, and why in the world they would pick so many strange English constructions when they put the so-called Hebrew and Greek into English. For the life of me, it mind-boggling in the New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So when I read their translation, it strikes me that this is not translated by God's people. They do not really understand or know God, and they don't really know Greek or Hebrew, or even, for some reason, they don't seem to be very good at English. So I tend to just flee away from that translation, because I view it as a voice of stranger, a translation from a stranger, somebody not in my family, in God's family. And verse 7, Jesus said, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. He was the door, and he proved it in so many different ways. I mean, he fulfilled all the prophecies of the Messiah in the Old Testament, and there are many. No one else did. Muhammad didn't. Buddha came before. Oh, he didn't either. He came after the prophecies, or most of them. I know of nobody that fulfilled those prophecies and entered into the job of the chief shepherd in the proper way. And then verse 8, all who came before me are thieves and robbers. So, I mean, Buddha came and he claimed to have the enlightened message so that people could be happy and so on and so forth. His message is drastically different in many ways from the Jewish, the message of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Drastically different. And I'm thinking he was being manipulated by the enemy to kind of misguide and deceive people. Now, it could have been partially a good start, but it seems to me he didn't keep going and didn't get fully enlightened. He only got partially a little bit enlightened, and then some of his enlightenment is like, it's really off the mark, way off the mark. You know, first principle of Buddhism, all life is suffering. I'm sorry, that's not the first principle. The first principle of life is that there's a beautiful God, powerful God who exists and is in charge. I would say that would be probably the first principle. Second principle is our desires, and according to Buddhism, our desires and our wants lead to our suffering. No, I think that's not the second principle either. You're wrong again. Second principle would be that God has a wonderful plan for everybody and everything. I'd say probably that's the second principle. Buddha says that the third principle is that we need to get rid of our wants and desires, and then we can be happy and have peace and be a blessing to mankind. I'd say no, that's not the third principle. He's wrong again. I'd say the third principle is that there's something blocking us from experiencing God's wonderful plan. I'd say that's more like the third principle. And then Buddha says, well, once you understand the situation you need and what needs to be done, then you need to embrace that with your mind, and then and start to carry to act upon that viewpoint and desire in the right way. And I'd say, nope, wrong again. I'd say that's not probably the fourth principle. I'd say probably the fourth principle would be that God has provided a way, a means to bridge the gap between his beautiful plan and our wretchedness, to get us through that thing that's blocking us from his beautiful family.